of getting Alzheimer's because his dad had died of early onset Alzheimer's, and as you know,
The world knew him as the brilliant, cigar-chomping detective Columbo. But Peter Falk's real-life final mystery was far more heartbreaking. As Alzheimer's slowly dimmed his sharp mind, a painful family divide emerged that would outlast even his passing. For years, rumors swirled about the bitter guardianship battle between his second wife and daughters from his first marriage. Now, more than a decade after his death,
that actor Peter Falk has died at his home in Beverly Hills after a battle with Alzheimer's disease.
Falk's daughters are finally revealing what happened in those agonizing final years.
I remember thinking to myself, I was in a panic, like I might never see my dad again.
Why was the family torn apart when he needed unity most? What painful decisions had to be made? And how did the man who solved every TV case become trapped in a real-life drama with no easy answers? The truth about Columbo's last case is more emotional than any episode he ever starred in. So, let's get into the video to find out what happened. Peter Falk was terrified of losing his mind. Alzheimer's had stolen his father from him, early and brutally. And now, Peter Falk, the sharp-eyed detective behind Columbo, was starting to forget. 12 years ago, the world lost a TV legend. The rumpled trench coat, the ever-present cigar, the sharp wit hidden behind a glass eye. Gone. But what most never saw was the heartbreaking story unfolding behind the scenes. A daughter was banned from his funeral. A bitter legal war. Secrets long buried suddenly rise to the surface. Peter Falk had two adopted daughters, Catherine and Jackie. But as his health declined, only Catherine stepped into the spotlight. Jackie stayed silent. Not a word, not a statement. Just absence. Why? The silence made Catherine's voice louder, sometimes too loud.
So I went into court and I said to the judge, I just want visitation. And she said she'd never seen an adult child come into court, ask for visitation, and not want a conservatorship. That streamlines this process and allows a path for visitation without spending $100,000 to go to court and to fight for something that is so expensive to do.
Back in 1992, long before Alzheimer's shadowed Peter's life, Catherine sued him. The reason? He stopped paying her college tuition. They settled out of court. But something shifted that day. Their already fragile bond began to crack. After Peter divorced his first wife, Alice Mayo, the family slowly drifted apart. Catherine vanished from public life, no longer seen at her father's side. Then came 2008. The symptoms were no longer subtle. Forgetfulness, confusion, moments of clarity slip away. That's when Catherine returned. But not just as a daughter. This time, as a plaintiff. She wanted legal guardianship of her father. She claimed Peter could no longer make decisions on his own. More than that, she accused his second wife, Shara Danes, of isolating him, keeping him away from his family, and controlling his every move. Was Peter Falk truly being hidden away in his final days? Court documents painted a chilling picture. My father no longer recognizes who is around him. I haven't seen him since June, Catherine said. But Shara wasn't silent. Her attorneys hit back fast, armed with Peter's notes. They said he didn't want Catherine involved at all. Not in his care, not in his finances, not even near him. Why? Some of Peter's writings called her disruptive, impatient, and unreliable. Could a father say that without reason? Or was his voice, already fading from illness, being used against him? In the end, Shara was confirmed as Peter's legal guardian. She had full control over everything: his health, his money, his legacy. The courtroom drama dragged on for weeks. Doctors, witnesses, legal teams, one family torn apart under the harsh lights of testimony and suspicion. And through it all, one question remained. Who was protecting Peter Falk? And who was fighting for control? It was a moment that chilled the courtroom. Dr. Stephen Reed, Peter Falk's longtime neurologist, stood and confirmed what many had feared, but few wanted to believe. The man who had once outwitted criminals as Columbo, who carried the role with such ease it felt like a second skin, could no longer even remember playing him. Reed testified that Peter Falk had lost the ability to make basic decisions. His mind, once razor-sharp and relentless, had faded beyond recognition. He recalled a disturbing incident. Falk had accidentally driven his car straight into a fence outside a building in Beverly Hills, and didn't grasp what had happened. How does someone forget something like Columbo? How does a mind so legendary lose its grip on the very role that defined it? The court listened, and the verdict was firm. Catherine's petition to replace Shara Denise Peters' second wife as legal guardian was denied. Instead, the judge allowed her only 2 brief visits each month. 30 minutes. Neutral ground. Supervised. And even that had to be court-ordered. Shara was explicitly prohibited from blocking the visits. Then came June 2011. At 83 years old, Peter Falk passed away at his Beverly Hills home. Quietly. Without his daughter by his side. When the will was read, it delivered a final blow. The bulk of Falk's estate, worth more than $5 million, went to Shara Denise. Catherine received only a small, conditional inheritance. If she contested it, she'd lose everything. And in the end, she did. Her attorney confirmed that every cent she received went into legal fees, used to fight for the simple right to see her father. From that moment on, all ties between Catherine and the Falk family were cut. But the public wasn't done with the story. Some believed Catherine had arrived too late, only after money and decisions were already on the line. Others were outraged on her behalf. How could a daughter be barred from her father's funeral? From saying goodbye? Major outlets, including the Los Angeles Times, The Guardian, and Daily Mail, attempted to piece the story together. But even they couldn't agree on who was right. No more lawsuits came, no fresh battles in court. But the damage was done. What began as a fading memory had grown into a full-blown family rift, played out in public, under the harsh gaze of the media. And just when it seemed the story was fading from headlines, the silence broke. Catherine Falk spoke. Not through lawyers, not through court papers. She sat in front of cameras years after her father's death and told the world plainly that she was never allowed to say goodbye. I didn't know he had passed. I wasn't allowed at the funeral. I never got to see him one last time. It was a confession that turned heads, not because it was loud, but because it was heartbreakingly human. That same year, she took her story to a podcast called Aging and Justice, and suddenly, people were listening again. What happened in the Falk household? Was it a daughter trying to reconnect too late, or a father's legacy quietly controlled by forces outside his grasp? The answers remain blurred. But once Catherine spoke, one thing became clear. The silence had hidden more than grief. I lost my final chance to hug my father. That cannot be undone. Those were the words Catherine Falk carried with her long after the courtroom battles ended. The door had closed. She never got to say goodbye, not even a quiet moment by his bedside. But instead of letting that pain consume her, she turned it into purpose. What if no other family had to go through what she did? What if a daughter, a son, or a sibling didn't have to wonder if their loved one died alone, because someone else signed a piece of paper? That question became her fuel. Catherine launched the Catherine Falk Organization not for publicity, but to challenge something most people don't even realize is legal. Under current U.S. guardianship laws, A court-appointed guardian, sometimes even a non-family member, can decide who gets to see a person with Alzheimer's or dementia, and who doesn't. No warning, no explanation, just silence. Her goal was simple yet powerful. No more silent goodbyes. No more doors slammed shut while someone fades away. In a short interview with CBS LA, her voice didn't crack, but it cut deep. Too many people are excluded from their loved one's final journey just because of a signature. How many families had already lived her nightmare? That question echoed loudly, and others started to listen. Support poured in from across the country. Families who'd been locked out of nursing homes, barred from hospitals, or kept from even knowing when their loved ones had died. Catherine wasn't just fighting her own battle anymore. She was giving their voice. She took her campaign to the New York State Legislature, standing before lawmakers to propose Peter Falk's law. A bill named not just after the icon, but after the man she knew as her father. The law would require legal guardians to notify the immediate family of major events, including health changes, hospitalizations, emergencies, and even funeral details. No more finding out from the news. No more wondering where or when your parents were buried. She told lawmakers in Nevada, "I'm not trying to gain control. I'm trying to regain my presence." The phrase stuck. Headlines picked it up. People began asking, why hadn't this law been in place before? In 2016, Peter Falk's law passed in New York. By 2023, at least 14 states had followed: California, Texas, Florida, and Washington. Each time, her father's name wasn't just remembered for Columbo, but for something far more human. In a press conference that same year, she said plainly, "No one, whether a child or a spouse, famous or unknown, deserves to be separated from their loved ones in their final days." For the first time in years, she also spoke about the man behind the trench coat. He wrote her letters from movie sets. He taught her how to read people by their handshake. He made her notice things others missed. "That's what made me a private investigator today," she shared. It painted a very different picture than the cold narrative Shara Denise once pushed in court, that Peter Falk had no real bond with his daughter. But who teaches someone to observe every detail if they don't care? Who writes letters from a set if they're emotionally absent? And maybe the bigger question, who gets to decide when a relationship ends? Memory loss or legal control? In Catherine's case, the fight wasn't over who her father was. It was over whether she still had the right to love him until the very end. Catherine Falk's fight didn't end with her father's death. It only deepened. The organization she founded in his name continues to work quietly but relentlessly in the background. It doesn't chase headlines. It chases change. Across the United States, her team updates guardianship laws, provides legal resources, and supports families who are separated from loved ones during their most vulnerable moments. According to the organization's reports, over 60% of cases involve guardians who fail to inform family members about their loved one's health, leaving sons, daughters, and spouses in the dark. Think about that number. 6 out of 10 families are blindsided. No warning, no answers, just silence. There's no record that Catherine ever profited from her campaign. Not a dollar. And since 2011, she hasn't taken Shara Denise to court again. Why not? Because it's no longer about blame. It's about fixing the law that let this happen. Legal scholars now describe her mission as reform-oriented, a measured, focused approach built on awareness and policy, not anger or personal vendettas. By sharing her story without throwing public accusations, Catherine did something unexpected. She built credibility. People began to look past the old headlines. Online platforms like Reddit and X, once teeming with theories about her motives, have shifted tone. The conversation now revolves around one truth. No one has fought for national legal reform in over a decade unless it holds something deeply personal. Her decision to confirm details, not accuse individuals, was subtle but powerful. She reframed the narrative. She wasn't trying to damage her father's image. She was trying to protect the last remaining part of it, his right to be surrounded by family as he slipped away. But even now, one haunting question lingers. Who was Peter Falk when the cameras stopped rolling? He wasn't just Columbo. He was born in 1927, in the heart of New York City, into a family with Eastern European Jewish roots. At just 3 years old, he was diagnosed with retinoblastoma and lost his right eye. A glass eye became his trademark, both on and off screen. You'd think that would have held him back, but it didn't. He didn't hide in corners or shy from attention. He became class president. He played baseball. Who plays baseball with one eye? Peter Falk did, because even then, before the trench coat and the catchphrase, before the courtroom drama and legal headlines, Peter Falk was already something rare, a man who refused to be defined by what he lost. And now, decades later, his daughter is fighting to make sure that others don't lose what matters most, the chance to say goodbye. Before he ever wore the trench coat, before the glass eye became iconic, Peter Falk was a government man. He had degrees in political science and literature from the New School, followed by a master's in public administration from Syracuse University. His early career was behind a desk at the Connecticut State Budget Office, analyzing financial efficiency, not interrogating suspects. Who would have guessed that a future television legend once spent his days buried in spreadsheets? He didn't even start acting until he was 30. And even then, the odds were stacked against him. A local theater group turned him away with a cold remark. His face wasn't right for the camera. Most would have walked away. But Falk didn't. He dove into training with theater legends like Ava Le Gallienne and Sanford Meisner, names that molded generations of New York actors. Falk started at the bottom, small, forgettable roles on stage, just a man trying to belong in a world that hadn't invited him. His first film role came in Wind Across the Everglades, but the real breakthrough happened in 1960 with Murder, Inc. His gritty portrayal of mobster Abe Rels earned him an Oscar nomination. Just 1 year later, he grabbed another nomination for Pocketful of Miracles, directed by Frank Capra. How does a state budget clerk become a 2-time Oscar nominee in 2 years? It wasn't a charm or polish. It was grit. He became a staple on Broadway, a respected face in Hollywood. But the moment that would change everything came in a made-for-TV movie called Prescription: Murder. The year was 1968. Falk played a detective unlike any the audience had seen, Lieutenant Columbo. Rumpled, slow-talking, apparently distracted, but always 2 steps ahead. The public loved him. By 1971, Columbo had its series. Over the next 3 decades, it ran for 69 episodes, earning Falk 4 Emmys, a Golden Globe, and a permanent place on TV Guide's list of the 50 greatest television actors. And who could forget the line? Just one more thing. A phrase so simple yet so unforgettable, it embedded itself in pop culture like a fingerprint. But Falk was more than just the sum of his catchphrases. He starred in unforgettable films like A Woman Under the Influence, The Princess Bride, and Wings of Desire. Whether intended or not, Peter Falk's image, once golden and iconic, now lives in the gray zone of speculation. And the media? Instead of steering the public back toward the actor's extraordinary achievements, headlines have fixated on his family feud. Editorial choices turned a masterclass of acting into the backdrop for a family's fracture. audiences, too, have played their part. Social media, while empowering voices, has blurred the line between tribute and tabloid. A tweet, a comment, or a single sentence, "He was kept from his daughter," can redefine a life. And when that happens, something greater is lost: authenticity. The name Columbo used to mean justice, curiosity, and the pursuit of truth. But now, it sometimes signals something more somber: a man who, in his final years, lived in silence while the world debated who truly knew him. Millions now know Peter Falk not through his work, but through controversy. In the end, the question remains, not who was right, not who was wrong, but this: is the man the public remembers Peter Falk, or just the version they've been told to believe? What happens when a legacy is no longer left behind, but taken? What happens when a life is redefined, not by truth, but by narrative? And most haunting of all, what would Columbo think of a case even he couldn't solve? Well, all these questions are still unanswered. So, what are your thoughts on it? Tell me about it in the comments section, and make sure to subscribe to the channel.